This is Alexis Renee Dowdridge here, and I am doing a interview with Mr. Harold Campbell, my grandfather. This is for a memory project, and today's date is Friday, March 16th, 2018. Location is home in Blairsville, Georgia. And we'll start off with why did you want to join the service?
Um, I really don't remember why, but I had a lot of influence from people that when I was a child, worked for or knew, or at school. I had a teacher that was a math teacher, and he's also physical ed teacher, and he kind of was a big influence on joining the Marine Corps.
Okay. And were you drafted, or did your parents have to sign for you?
No, I joined when I was 17. My parents had to sign for me.
Okay. And can you tell me a little bit about boot camp? Where were you stationed?
Um, well, I went to San Diego because we lived in Denver, lived in Colorado at the time, and so um, I went to boot camp, which was completely different for me because my parents had never really cussed or anything around. And when I got there, it was I heard names that I never ever heard before called, and so it was quite an experience. But uh, although it was very difficult, I got a whole lot out of it. It was completely changed me for the rest of my life, which for the best.
And so, what was your primary job like after training? Where were you sent after that?
We went to ITR training after boot camp for I think it was 6 weeks or so, and that's where they determined where they're where they would want us to be or want us to be. I ended up as an old 331, which is a machine gunner.
And where did you spend the majority of your time in service?
Um, the majority of the time in the service, I was in for a 2-year tour duty in Port Laudi, Morocco, Africa.
Now, can you explain to me a little bit about Morocco? Any of your time there, a sense of were you stationed in an area like in a base, or were you able to do any civilian things?
The base itself was at that time, it took care of the majority of all communications to Europe, and it went through there basically. And so what we did was guard duty. Um, Spent some time as embassy guard, uh, where they, had to go to school for that again. And but anyway, that was some of the better duty over there.
Now, whenever you were doing your guard duty, did you also do things with the shooting range, like the rifle coach? Did you do that there in
No,
Morocco?
that was I did that after I came back from Morocco. So I was at when we came back, they stationed me at El Toro. It was a Marine Corps Air Wing, and they had a rifle range there for they they did most of reservist uh, officers mainly, and so I was a rifle coach on that one to qualify each and every one that came through there. So
Can you tell me about some of the people that you met, the people that you were also stationed with there when you were doing the rifle range?
um, not so much there. I can't remember recalling any of them, but I went through boot camp with one guy, particular guy that um, we was together majority of all the time that was in the service. Even in Morocco, he's the reason I even went over there to Morocco. But anyway, he was stationed when we came back to 29 Palms, which is uh, the southern part of California. And so we used to drive back and forth. He'd come up and see me. I'd go down there and see him. But in particular, yeah, he was the A gunner on my as a group, as a machine gunner. He also um, was a good friend when I got out later on. He got discharged and came back to Colorado there and got lived with us for a while, me and my wife, and then with his wife and kids, and then he moved out and he's had got sugar diabetes, and so um, that's the reason he got discharged. He was a gunnery sergeant when he got discharged.
So he is this the one that got diabetes from drinking too many sodas
Yeah,
from the hot sun?
he was after I got out. Then they put him in. He went to England is where he went when he shipped over, and that's where he met his wife and got married. Came back, and then they sent him to. Um, I can't remember exactly where they sent him at that time, but he ended up in Virginia, um, and he was training Marine officers. Is what he was training, and that's where, of course, he'd go in and out of the field there, where it was really hot on the grinder, we used to call it, and every time he'd come back in, he'd have a Coke, and consequently, he ended up with sugar diabetes.
Oh gosh. Whenever you left Morocco, like your last time, whenever you came back um, after serving, why did you leave the service?
I had extended the total of 2 years more than that I enlisted for, but my intentions was to ship over for another 6 years. So when I came home, I wanted a little bit more time than 30 days, and so I had up to 6 months to come back in. But then I met my wife, and she would not tolerate being married to a serviceman. So it ended up I got out completely. So.
And with your service, did the war change your life of being able to serve?
Uh, well, I think it changed everybody's life. It was experience that I don't know if anybody really likes to talk about it, but it was like a shameful thing that we did when we came home, and it really wasn't. It was something that we was uh, taught to do um, and to tolerate, and we got kicked in the face for it. So by Americans, and that's why most of them that stayed in probably shipped over to overseas station somewhere else because they couldn't deal with Americans the way they treated it.
Now, we'll go back into whenever you were serving at that time. It was in the '60s and stuff. Were there any songs that you remember, or any movies that you watched that kind of helped you relieve stress?
Yeah, there was a lot of stuff that I can't remember uh, most of the songs was, about home, but I don't recall. I know a lot of them. I just don't remember their names. So, but yeah, music was a
Mhm.
big factor for probably every one of us.
I know I'm hopping around, but there was a story that you told me um, that you were on a ship and you had gotten seasick and you had to sit on your stomach. Can
Well,
you explain that one, that story?
yeah, we was on an APA, a troop carrier, and we had we had got to I believe it was Korea. I believe it was. I can't remember where exactly, but we had to go back out because there was a typhoon coming, and so I happened to have that duty for that night, and so we went out in the ocean where the typhoon was, because that's where they sent all the ships out because it was less dangerous than being tied up ashore. So that was a miserable night. But, and you get nobody was allowed above, were outside or anything on that ship. So it was pretty. I think a lot of people got sick, but they would still come in, and I had the thing laying on my chest where they had to sign in and out wherever they went. They had a movie even going on at the same time, so I just laid there. They just signed it.
That's crazy for both rocking and
Oh, terrible, terrible. And we was on the bottom of the ship
oh
too to
gosh.
beat that, so it was just terrible.
Now there is a picture that is hanging up in our hallway, and it's showing you taking down a United States flag in Morocco. Can you explain that picture?
Uh, when we left there, that was the last time that the American flag would fly on that particular base, because we was handed it over back to the Moroccans. Um, we had taken that base from the Germans clear back in World War II, and we had kept that base clear up until that time when we turned it over, and it was a pretty big deal. I think it was in Post magazine or Life magazine or something, and they're the ones that give me the photograph, and it just happened to be I was on duty that day of taking the flag down, and when we got it down, we folded it for the last time, and it wasn't but maybe 2 hours after that we was on flight back to coming back to the United States. So
Um, there was also looking through your books of boot camp and all that stuff. There was a time that I believe you were in Vietnam and you got to see Eisenhower, President Eisenhower.
no, that was we was in Okinawa.
Okinawa.
Yeah, uh, he had visited there, so that was a big deal for us.
Were you
Big
able
deal.
to interact with them or?
No, no. All we did was stand guard on the side of the road there. So,
It's a pretty pivotal moment. It's pretty cool.
but he did come real close. I mean, we could, I mean, you could go out there and touch him if you wanted, but you'd probably get shot. So,
That wouldn't have been a good idea, no.
yeah.
um, Going back to Morocco, when you were doing guard and things like that, you spoke about Berbers. Now,
Berber
explain to me what those.
tribe Berbers, they are in the desert there, and they're really they have no place particular, so they move around. They got camels, they got horses, but this particular post we had was a tower, and there's plenty of other towers around, but we was one of the guards that was on the tower that for like every 10 miles, 5 miles. And so they would play with us, and they would ride through there hollering and screaming and shooting, and sometimes they'd hit the steel wall that was in front of us, so you'd have to just get down. And they told us that and there was holes all over the place. It didn't go through because it was real thick metal.
That's
And
good.
so
That's
they wasn't trying to kill us, but if you didn't know him better, you would say they are.
Now, I don't want to go in depth about Vietnam because I know that those are pretty those are very personal. But how long did you stay in Vietnam? The time allotted.
Well, fortunately, I was only there approximately 3 months, so
3 months.
that was good for me.
And what was your duty?
We went there basically to take out some missionaries, is what our purpose was for going there at that time. And it was just prior to uh, actually sending troops over there. So,
And with your service, is there anything or any piece of advice that you'd give people nowadays who might want to go into the service, or how it would help people?
join the Marine Corps. But it left an impression on me. It's helped me through my life as a businessman. It's helped through you know being able to handle a large group of people, uh, organize them to get things done. There's memories that will always be there. That people that you was with that watched your back and you watched theirs, and it was just brotherhood.
Right. Now, you were able to guard a piece of the moving Vietnam wall.
Yes.
Can you explain that? I believe it was about 2 years ago you were able to do that.
Yeah. The VBA sponsored get a wall here, and I was never able to get to Washington to see it. So when I found this out, I thought that was the most important thing in my life at the time, to be able to see it, and just see some particular names of people that I knew, that I had been with, that didn't come back. So it was very important to me, and it was important to every one of the guys that was there to do that, and meant a lot to us. So.
Now, what was your job? Did you do like a shift type thing?
Yeah, I stayed all night. What we did was we had to guard the wall, and it wasn't some necessarily guard, but there was lots and lots of people that wouldn't come during the day. They would want it to come at night so they could spend the time and put their hand on the name, and so that's what we was there for, to help.
And it was good that it was located in Blairsville.
Oh yes, yeah.
So you were able to.
That was a wonderful thing, and I think anybody that went there really touched them. So.
Well, before we go, I just want to say thank you for your service, and that I was really blessed to be able to have this experience with you. So thank you, Papa.
Well, thank you for being my granddaughter.